Good morning, TOK. Welcome to class number 14. Whew, after class 13, or 13A if you saw the patched and revised video. Uh, this is going to be a walk in the park after last time. Um, let's talk about identity, and let's get right to it. What do you know? Once again, we do have a warning. This presentation contains discussions of human sexuality that are appropriate to our academic studies. The language used is forthright and accurate. Respectful and mature approach is strongly advised. I'm going to go past that. I'm going to say a respectful and mature approach is required. If you're not mature enough for this, you're not mature enough for college work. Yeah, I think we covered this pretty well last time. In class 13, we talked a lot about gender. We talked about sex. We talked about gender orientation, sexual orientation. We talked about gender identity, talked about performative gender. Let's look at the aspect of identity that is essential to the individual, living one's gender. What is the experience of having a distinct gender identity, and how does it shape the individual? That's where we're looking today. For those of you who like to just watch these videos without having to go to a lot of other sources, I hate to tell you, but this video is mostly going to act as a bridge among some links that you're going to be following today. All the links are in the assignment email. For those of you who are watching this video without the assignment email, they will be linked at the end of the video. We're going to be looking at a number of individuals who are telling stories about who they are, their identities, how gender and orientation relate to their identities as they live their lives. And it's always, I think, important when talking about gender and gender identity to bring up Freddie Mercury, the great late singer from Queen, who said, "The most important thing is to live a fabulous life. As long as it's fabulous, I don't care how long it is." Well, I do care how long it is. I hope that all of you are going to live long and rewarding lives. And one way to make sure those lives are rewarding is to have a good understanding of your own gender and gender identity, so that component of your sense of self doesn't cause stress, friction, confusion, or anxiety. We're going to start off today by looking at straight people and talking to some straight people. Specifically, we'll be talking to some straight people in India today. In India, it is currently illegal for people of people of the same gender to marry. There is no gay marriage or marriage equality. It is, in fact, illegal to be homosexual or to commit sexual acts with a partner of the same gender in the country of India, something which some activists are starting to question. Again, we see a global trend overall of more modern young people being much more open to the idea of this being an equality issue, as opposed to older generations who tended to view it as a cultural, religious, or doctrinal issue. So first, let's, in the words of Lady Gaga, let's find out who was born that way. Okay, so at this point you should have paused the video if you've not done so already, and you should have watched the TrendSpotter TV video, When Did You Choose to Be Straight? It's amazing the number of people who identify as straight who, when surveyed, will say that people who are LGBTQ are choosing that gender expression, that orientation. They'll often dismissively use the phrase lifestyle instead of identity. And yet, when you ask them about their own gender expression, when you ask them about when did they choose to be straight, they're completely baffled and they immediately fall back on, well, I was born this way. It's just how I naturally am. So there is an intrinsic assumption among some people that the way they are is the natural way which people are just born, and the other people are wrong. Younger, more progressive people are tending to view this as a conversion point, as a tipping point in attitudes. That some people, as you may have seen in the TrendSpotter TV video, when you ask them, when did you choose to be straight? They say, well, of course I didn't choose it. I was born this way. And then you ask them the follow up. So when do gay people choose to be gay? And they go, oh, well, actually I have a couple of gay friends and they pretty much seem to have always been that way. It's funny how that works. On to the subject of this slide. Why is it okay to bash bi? I want you to watch the video. It's a short clip from the TV show Sex and the City on HBO, which at the time was a very, very popular television show. It set a lot of cultural milestones in terms of style, fashion. It was a trend-setting, conversation-starting TV series that dealt forthrightly with a group of four women friends and their relationships and their sexuality. Having said that, the clip that you're going to watch shows almost every negative stereotype, myth, bashing of bisexuals. There's somehow this idea that bisexuals are just greedy. They're either really gay and just don't want to say so, or they're really straight, but they also want to have gay partners. There's somehow this idea that you just have to pick one and everybody else is fooling themselves. There's not a lot of evidence to back that up. In fact, there's personal anecdotal experience from thousands upon thousands, millions of bi people who say, no, that's just who we are. For our class, certainly we're going to give such people the benefit of the doubt. I'm not asking any of y'all to prove your gender identity, your orientation, or gender expression, nor do I expect you to demand that of anyone else. One group that we haven't talked a lot about are the ace population, asexual people, people who typically deny that although they don't deny they have gender, they view orientation as irrelevant. They don't feel or don't acknowledge an essential role for romantic or sexual attraction or sexual expression in their lives. There's a huge variety of facets of ways that this expresses itself. We're just going to look at one person, a young person named Ken from Japan, and this video is interesting in that not only looks at Ken, but it also looks at his partner. Yes, asexual people are not all saying, I wish to be a hermit and live alone and have no relationships with anyone. They're simply saying that that relationship is not based upon or may not feature sex or sexuality. Ken's video, I think, is very interesting and worth a quick watch. And this brings us to our final video clip. Michael Crumrine, a police officer from, I want to say San Antonio originally. Michael does a great job about talking about how his gender and living his authentic gender allows him to be his authentic self. That that denying some aspect of his personhood to fit a stereotype or a cultural expectation really leads him to being less than his ideal self as a person. This is one of several videos from the collection I'm from Driftwood, which is a video and audio archive of LGBTQ stories. Their website is very interesting, and many of their videos are present on YouTube as well. I strongly suggest if this is a subject that interests you, that you take a look at the I'm from Driftwood. Some of the stories are breathtaking, some are heartbreaking. All of them I've found have been interesting in giving us perspective onto the authentic selves of others. Okay, we're getting to the end, but before we get to the reflection, I just want to mention in the resources, both in the email and listed at the end of this video, there is a link to a website. There's unfortunately not a video of this, but there's an article from the BBC from an author named Brandon Ambrosino, where he talks about the invention of heterosexuality. Um, yeah, it turns out that the concept of heterosexuality, which to many people is the quote, quote, normal or default position of humanity, um, that it's a relatively recent invention. That certainly there were people who we would look at today and say, ah, this person was heterosexual. But the term itself is modern. We didn't look at gender and gender identity and orientation and sex in a way that required a term for what most people are and what most people do until the late 1800s. Um, if you ask a fish about the water, he's not going to have much to tell you because he can't envision the world without it. This is how many people in researchers in philosophy, psychology, sociology viewed heterosexuality up until the point we realized that there are so many other expressions of human life, and not just human life, but also other animals as well, until we realized that there's so much variation that we needed a term for the middle of the bell curve. We needed a term for the most commonly expressed set of options. And Ambrosino does a nice job of briefly explaining that in his BBC article. All right, so let's get to reflection. I want you to think about everything we've talked about in the last couple of days about gender, sex, orientation, gender identity. Based on our previous discussions and the videos you've watched today, how do explorations of these things make use of the ways of knowing? To what extent are people's gender and the gender components of their identities shaped by language, sense perception, emotion, reason, imagination, faith, intuition, and memory? I'm going to post a Padlet link in your assignment email as well, and I'm going to ask you to make an observation. When you post an observation on the Padlet, please make sure that you're logged in. You can also comment or add questions or notes or likes to the posts of others. But to meet the assignment requirements, you do need at least a brief posting of your own. And I would like you to get those postings done before Monday, before next Monday. All right, that takes us to the end of class 14. I'm going to share the resources with you next, and that'll take us out. I look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon. Have a wonderful afternoon. As promised, the sources page contains links. These links are also present in your assignment email. Also, in the assignment email, I will have the Padlet. When I constructed the video, the Padlet was not finished. It should be up and running and linked in the email by the time you receive it. Thank you very much. Have a great day. What do you know?